Hey, this is Pastor Bunjee Garrett, and I want to take some time today to present you with another word of encouragement. Well, here we are. It's the 14th day of Adar on the Jewish calendar, and what this means is that today is the Feast of Purim. Just to be clear, the Feast of Purim is the commemoration of the day when a man named Haman was hung from his own gallows, after trying to lead the people of Persia to purge the land of Persia from every Jew. Now, in case you're unfamiliar with this evil individual, it'll help you to know that Haman was an Agagite who was believed to be a descendant of Agag, the king of the Amalekites. And the Amalekites, well, they were the first enemies to attack Israel after leaving the land of Egypt. And not only that, but it was later during the 5th century BC, that's when Haman the Agagite, he used his influence there in the land of Persia to convince the king of Persia that they needed to annihilate all of the Jews. We find the historic account of this situation in the Book of Esther, where we learn that Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were living in the kingdom under the reign of King Ahasuerus. And it's with this goal that they cast lots, which in Hebrew is Purim. And, after casting Purim, it was determined that the Jews would be annihilated on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Thankfully, the Lord raised up a young Jewish girl named Esther, who became the queen of Persia. And because of her incredible courage, the bloodline of our Messiah was saved from annihilation, which is why Purim should be a time of celebration, not just for the Jews, but also for every Christian. Now, in order to understand God's providential plan for Purim, I want to take a moment to consider Haman's evil plot. It's in Esther chapter 3, beginning at verse 8, where we learn that Haman said to King Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from all other peoples, and they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore, it is not fitting for the king to let them remain. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written that they be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work to bring it into the king's treasuries." So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, "The money and the people are given to you to do with them as seems good to you." Then the king's scribes were called on the 13th day of the first month, and a decree was written according to all that Haman commanded, to the king's satraps, to the governors who were over each province, to the officials of all the people, to every province according to its script, and to every people in their language, in the name of the king Ahasuerus. It is written and sealed with the king's signet ring. And the letters were sent by couriers into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. A copy of the document was to be issued as law in every province, being published for all people, that they should be ready for that day. So according to this historic account, the king of Persia issued a royal decree at the request of Haman, which provided the people of Persia with the legal right to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews. Whether they were young or old, little children, women, they were all to be killed on the 13th day of the 12th month. Now, just to be clear, this genocide of the Jews was supposed to take place throughout the entire kingdom of Persia nearly 2,500 years ago. And listen, this would have included the Jews who had returned to Israel after the Babylonian captivity. And while it's true that Haman was preparing to celebrate the extermination of the Jews on the 13th day of Adar, it's also true that his genocidal plans were thwarted by a young Jewish girl named Esther. You see, it was Esther who was providentially placed in the palace of King Ahasuerus, and it was Esther who became the queen of Persia after catching the eye of the king. And it was Esther who risked her life by revealing her Jewish lineage to the king after this decree was given. And, all of this according to the encouragement of her, adoptive father, Mordecai, who assured her that the God of Israel was going to use her to save the children of Israel. It's actually in Esther chapter 4. There we find Mordecai encouraging Esther to use her position as queen to influence the king of Persia. And in response, Esther shared her concerns by informing Mordecai that anyone who goes into the inner court to the king who has not been called will be put to death unless he holds out the golden scepter that he may live. Well, being that Esther hadn't been called to go into the king for at least 30 days, she couldn't be certain that she would survive this uninvited meeting. And in response to her concerns, Mordecai assured Esther that this was her time to trust in the deliverance of the Lord. Here's how he put it in Esther chapter 4. There, Mordecai declares, "Do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" That's right. Queen Esther was providentially placed in the king's palace so that she could secure the salvation of her people. Well, in order to sum up the story, it'll help you to know that Queen Esther asked the king and Haman to join her for a feast. And it was during their time together when Esther informed the king that there was an evil plot to kill her as well as her people. Then, after revealing her Jewish lineage to the king, he granted the Jews the right to defend themselves on the 13th day of Adar. When all was said and done, the Lord delivered the Jews from the Persians who were trying to exterminate them. And as for Haman, he was hung from his own gallows on the very next day, nearly 2,500 years ago. Well, it's in Esther chapter 9 where we read this. Beginning at verse 1, we read, "Now in the 12th month, that is the month of Adar, on the 13th day, the time came for the king's command and his decree to be executed. On the day that the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, the opposite occurred, in that the Jews themselves overpowered those who hated them. The Jews gathered together in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought their harm. And no one could withstand them because fear of them fell upon all people. And all the officials of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and all those doing the king's work helped the Jews because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's palace, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces. For this man, Mordecai, became increasingly prominent. Thus the Jews defeated all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, with slaughter and destruction, and did what they pleased with those who hated them." Now, as we consider the way in which the Lord enabled the Jews to defeat their enemies throughout the kingdom of Persia, the enemies of Israel today will do well to realize that the God of Israel is the one who is reestablishing the Jews in the land of their inheritance. As we consider how the nation of Israel is once again at war with Persia, which is now known as Iran, I can assure you that the Lord is going to again deliver the people of Israel from their enemies. Therefore, the people there in Iran, they will do well to revisit this story of Haman and how his life ended on his own gallows. They will do well to remember that those who curse Israel will be cursed. And those who serve as the proxy terror groups of Iran, they should take some time to realize that the God of Israel, he used a young Jewish girl named Esther to deliver the descendants of Israel from the genocidal desires of Haman. So now imagine what he might do with the Israel Defense Force today. In light of these things, I believe that every Christian should celebrate this annual feast of Purim, especially as we consider how Esther and Mordecai were used to protect the bloodline from which came our Messiah, Jesus Christ. And with that being the case, I encourage every Christian, let's look at the Feast of Purim as another opportunity to preach the good news that salvation is received by faith in the promised Messiah, Jesus Christ. And much like Esther, we need to recognize that it's for such a time as this that the Lord has raised us up to go and preach this good news to the world. For such a time as this, we've been called to fight the good fight of faith, and all for the glory of God.